We have breaking news on the domestic front this time. There has been a terror attack in New Orleans overnight, just hours ago, and when the revelers are still enjoying the New Year's Eve or the New Year's night festivities in New Orleans at 3 a.m. There was a terrible, not accident, but a terrorist attack that killed, I believe, as of now, 15 people dead and 35 were wounded. This just moments ago was released by the New Orleans Police Department spokesman on what is happening.
Today at approximately 3:15 a.m. Central Standard Time, an individual drove a pickup truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, killing at least 10 individuals and injuring dozens more. After hitting the crowd, he exited the vehicle and fired upon local law enforcement. Law enforcement returned fire and the subject was pronounced deceased at the scene. 2 law enforcement officers were injured and transported to local hospitals. The subject has been identified as 42-year-old Shamsud Dim Jabbar, a U.S.-born citizen from Texas. He was driving a Ford pickup truck, which appears to be rented, and we are working to confirm how the subject came in possession of this vehicle. An ISIS flag was located on the trailer hitch of the vehicle, and the FBI is working to determine the subject's potential associations and affiliations with terrorist organizations. Weapons and potential improvised explosive devices, IEDs, were located in the subject's vehicle. Other potential IEDs were also located in the French Quarter. As of now, 2 IEDs have been found and rendered safe. The FBI Special Agent bomb technicians, as well as our local law enforcement partners, have been working to determine if any of these devices are viable, and they will work to render those devices safe. The FBI, we are working with our partners to investigate this as an act of terrorism. We're aggressively running down all of the leads to identify the possible subject's associates. We're working to ensure that there is no further threat. We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates.
And as you can hear from that the commentary right there, they don't think that this was a lone wolf, and we'll be discussing that in a little bit more detail. One of the things that she said also, and that by the way, I misidentified, that's Ann Kirkpatrick, I believe, from the FBI, not from the local people. That we'll hear from them later. But she also talked about the identity of the man, which they do now have, and here's what she had to say on that.
At this time, we cannot go into details about the subject's history. What I can tell you, the person was an Army veteran. We believe he was honorary discharged, but we're working through this process, figuring out all this information. It's a range of suspects, and right now with the FBI, we do not want to rule anything out, so that's why we're asking if anyone has had any interaction with the deceased subject, Jabbar, in the last 72 hours, provide us with this information.
Now, listen, we'll have to just say right off the top that this is a breaking news situation. There is a tremendous amount that we don't know. Lots of speculation from a number of different people. We're going to hear things actually by both President Biden and Trump, President-elect Trump here shortly, which were made at various times. And some information has come out even since those. But we want to give you what we do know, because there are a number of things we do know. And then we'll make some assessments of where things may go from here, because this is going to be very important. One of the first things that people want to make sure of is that, look, I saw this several times from my time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and some of the preparation for those deployments I had, that sometimes you would have a complex attack to where somebody would take an action on one place, and when you had people responding, and while everybody's looking here in the aftermath, then all of a sudden there could be additional attacks. So if the FBI is right in that this was not a lone wolf, and that there were, in summary, other reports I've read said that there were at least 4 people involved, then the risk may not be over. It could also be that these other IEDs, I believe there were, by other reports, at least 4 of those as well. She said in that first clip I showed you that 2 of them had been found and taken care of, rendered inert. But the question is, what about the other 2? And are there others we don't know about? Another question that I've got, were they command detonated? Were they timers? Meaning, was someone else perhaps aware of this? That's what we don't know. There is If you haven't seen the video, I think Gary was showing part of it there. We'll roll it again. This is what happened, and let me set this up for you, this because it's very interesting in how this happened. Because you're going to see that's the white truck there where that arrow is pointing at. It's going to be moving down the road. Interesting thing you're about to see is you'll see a police car up on the left. You'll see the lights that are floating around it. He goes right past the police car and then makes a hard right turn right about here. And then that's when all the bad things start happening. And he rolls on down the street right there, and you see the policeman get out of his vehicle right after that point. What this tells you is that this is almost certainly a well-run operation from this terrorist perspective. The terrorist, by the way, was named Shamsud bin Din Jabbar, 42-year-old. He is a Texas native. He had only 2 minor arrests up to this point. So if you're looking for his past, so far they found out that he had just 2 minor, one for petty theft in Katy, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston, and then driving without a license. So no evidence that he had any kind of criminal behavior before that. But he was an Army veteran, and there hasn't been a lot listed so far. So we don't know what kind of unit he was in, what he did while he was on activity. Was he deployed? Because he's 42, so he definitely could have been in both Iraq and Afghanistan. We don't know what his rank was, how long he served, et cetera. As soon as we get that information, we'll certainly be sharing it with you. But what this tells you, and that's enough information to tell you this is probably somebody that knew what they were doing, that had a methodically planned and reconned route. And the reason why I say that he was probably planned is because it seemed like he really knew what the lay of the land was. He wasn't surprised by anything. It wasn't just some one-off kind of, crazy deal that just plowed into a crowd somewhere. He knew where there was barriers and he knew where there wasn't. Here is the police chief, I think, for New Orleans explaining what did and didn't happen.
So we have been aware of the Baller situation for a long time. And we did indeed harden those target areas where the ballers are. We had patrol cars out there as a hard target, as well as with barriers. Now, I want to share with y'all, if you did not know, that this particular terrorist drove around onto the sidewalk and got around the hard target, where he did have a car there. We had barriers there. We had officers there, and they still got around. Now, the wedges that you see out there as well, we knew that had malfunction problems. And I want you to understand, let's say we put the wedge up and it got stuck. There is no way that ambulance could get in or out. People couldn't get in and out. So we knew that these were malfunction. So we did indeed have a plan, but the terrorist defeated it.
So there you see that if you weren't sure about some of that terminology, basically there was a number of barriers that they had. Ordinarily, they have Bourbon Street completely blocked off, but some of the barriers had not functioned. So they took what they thought was a reasonable approach, which is to have a police car sitting right there. And you saw that was one of apparently many. I think I saw as many as 200, or no, I think it was 300 policemen were deployed around the area to keep it safe. That will work if you're trying to keep somebody from like a drunk driver, which was one of the original thoughts. So maybe this is somebody that lost control of his vehicle, because obviously a lot of people are drinking in New Orleans at 3 a.m. in the morning on New Year's night. But they say, no, that's not what happened. This was intentional. So that if you have something like that and there's just a little bit of space between that, then somebody who's very much coherent will drive around it and get behind it. And you saw that that was, no target of opportunity issue there. So by all estimations, this Jabbar fellow, this terrorist person, knew what he was doing and had made a plan. And I'm sure that's something the FBI is going to be looking into with a fine-tooth comb to come up. And of course, the biggest issue is right now, aside from is the danger over with right now, who was behind this? Has Jabbar just been a radicalized terrorist? Was it something that maybe he had been to Iraq and to Afghanistan or to anywhere else for that matter, and maybe he got radicalized by what he saw, that he apparently he was a Muslim by birth and by name at least. And so we don't know anything about his personal religious background. Had he been writing anything on social media? Those are all things we're going to be looking for. But I think the first thing that our authorities need to identify is, was this guy self-radicalized because of his experiences, or was he recruited by somebody from an ISIS background? Because as you heard in that first clip there apparently was an ISIS flag on the back of his vehicle. So this guy went into this almost certainly knowing that he was going to die. He didn't appear to have an exit strategy. He didn't appear to have any intention of leaving the scene. Because, when he went behind that situation there and behind the barrier and in front of the policeman, obviously he knows that the place is going to be swarming with police and that he's going to be found. And he tried to go out in a blaze of glory, which he eventually succeeded in doing. It did wound 2 police officers in the process. And of course, as the current death toll is 15 dead and still 35 wounded. And we don't know the difficulty of some of those wounds and how far, whether anybody else is going to be added to that total. We certainly hope that they don't. They're in the initial time after this, and I know it was on Fox News and all over social media. Anytime you get information, people run to just spread things around without really waiting to find out. And one of the initial comments was that this truck had passed through Eagle Pass only 2 days ago. And so it had come from Mexico through the Eagle Pass and had come up here. That was the claim. Now, ironically, that could possibly turn out to be true, except that does not mean that the terrorist came from down there, because the vehicle was rented through Turo. And if you're not familiar with Turo, that's basically a kind of like an Airbnb, how people put their homes and their domiciles up for rent. That's the same thing with Turo, where an individual can rent his own vehicle or so. So somebody rented this. So that person, whoever owns the vehicle, could well have come through Eagle Pass. There was another report that it actually came through in November, and that may have nothing to do at all with what happened here. But it also may, and I'm sure that the FBI will be looking very carefully at the person that gave him that. Did he know what the vehicle was going to be used for, et cetera? Were they in cahoots on this? It doesn't seem reasonable that you would. If you're trying to avoid detection, you're probably not going to be the one to actually allow your vehicle to be used in the commission of a terrorist act. But you can't assume anything. You have to follow every single lead. One of the other things we wonder is, was this an ISIS copycat kind of thing? Meaning that did he see how ISIS have done in the past? As I told you, I've actually seen some similar kinds of situations with this, where there is a vehicle, and those cases in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was a vehicle-borne bomb itself. And by the way, the vehicle, by all reports, was rigged as a bomb. It could well also be that his intention was to plow this in there and perhaps blow the vehicle up when the police came by, but he ended up getting killed before then. So if it was a command detonated rigging, then that would tell you his intention was probably to be surrounded. But apparently the police officers took decisive action very quickly and neutralized that possibility. The death toll could have been so much more. We don't know how much explosives were in those in the vehicle, because I can assure you from things that I have observed and training that I did prior to my deployments, if there's enough explosive in a vehicle like that, it can cause tremendous amounts of additional damage. And especially when it's that densely packed with people, folks, this death toll could have been in the many scores, if not even the hundreds, if that had gone off. So it looks like quick action by the police department may well have prevented what is a terrible accident from being a catastrophic one for New Orleans. The next question is, what is going to happen because of this? And let me first of all show you just a couple of comments, one from President Biden and a second initial response from President-elect Trump.
Do you understand if the person crossed the border?
I'm not going to comment on any specific yet at all. I've contacted every agency in the federal government as well as the state. We're all coordinating to get to the bare facts.
Can you say if he was a foreigner or if he was a domestic?
I'm not going to say anything until I get all the facts in front of me.
And then Trump released this on his social media, Truth Social, where he said that when I said that criminals are coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, that statement was constantly refuted by the Democrats and fake news media, but it turned out to be true. The crime rate in our country is at a level that nobody has ever seen before. Our hearts are with all the innocent victims and their loved ones, including the brave officers of the New Orleans Police Department. I can't remember, Gary, is that the end of that? Is that the end of that statement? Was there any? I can't remember if there's any more than that.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's it.
Okay, that was the extent of his statement there. And of course, both of them, you see that they were asking President Biden when he was about to get on that plane, about the reports. Did he come across Mexico? And Biden, of course, wasn't going to answer any of those questions because he doesn't have a lot of the information. Doesn't do the president of the United States any good to speculate, because everybody is going to seize on every one of his words. And if it proves that later on to be inaccurate, well, then they'll just come after him. So it doesn't help anyone for him to speculate on that. Trump, for his part, is just, I mean, he's not president yet, so he doesn't have any authority. But we can assume that he's going to use every tool he can to with the FBI, once he does get in power here in about 3 weeks, to continue to examine to find out what's going on there. And this is apparently the Gary's showing here. This is the Army veteran who took this act. Don't know anything about when that photograph was taken, but it's just absolutely terrifying, especially that picture on the right there, where you see someone already on the ground and someone just standing there terrified. It was apparently as the gunman's running by. It's just hard to believe that something like this could happen, in the heart of New Orleans. But listen, one of the first things that a lot of people are going to be going doing is because he had that ISIS flag, they're going to be looking at what happened there. Now, this is where things get dicey, because I want to say right now, while all of the emotion is at its, only at the beginning, and it could get a lot worse here, we have to resist the temptation to say, oh, this is ISIS. They did that for the guys that are in Syria. So we need to, reinforce all of our activities there. We need to send more people to Syria. We need to completely go until ISIS is destroyed. Hang on with that for a second. Now, it could absolutely be that this was something that ISIS activists in Syria or Iraq, because they're still in both places, may well have tried to recruit this guy. Maybe they were on some of these violent extremist chat groups, etc., where they were looking for somebody, found somebody who's willing to do it. They were already radicalized and they pushed them over the edge. And if that was the case, obviously we need to do everything we can to destroy those people who took action against the United States. But these troops here, and I suspect that one of the things you're going to hear the current administration, and I'm going to push back on this even before it happens, and I will definitely do so if they do say this, is that they'll say, see, this validates the enduring defeat of ISIS mission that we have there. We need to redouble our efforts. This shows why what we've been doing is right all along. No, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, I suspect that if you do dig down deep enough, you may find that this was, in fact, part of the reason why it happened at all. Had we withdrawn the troops when Trump first said he was going to, actually the third time, but during his time in office, after the March 2029, when the ISIS had been deprived of their holdings in Mosul, in Iraq, and in Raqqa in Syria. But at that time, the military mission that those troops had was gone. By all rights, the U.S. should have withdrawn our troops and brought them back home. There was no more military mission, even quasi had related to American security as that was, because Syria and Iraq are the countries that are involved there, and that terrorist group was against both of the regimes, and it's their responsibility to handle their own domestic issues there. They needed to handle this, and instead we did not want to withdraw our people, and we kept them there and just came up with this anti-ISIS enduring defeat mission, which was nonsense, because with this tiny number of people in just dotted around on the map, and these in Syria and a couple in Jordan, and of course in Iraq, allegedly going after this. But all they did was periodically little pinprick attacks here and there. Last report I saw, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 associated ISIS people. And of course, that's also a kind of an interesting thing, because it's sort of like the Taliban during my time in the Afghanistan, to where, yes, there were at any given time 2,000 when I was there in 2005, I think 15 or 20,000 when I was there in 2010. They're there, but for the most part, they're just local people. They're farmers. They're just businessmen. They're workers, whatever, during the daytime, and then they'll take activity because they didn't want the United States there. But for the most part, they're just Afghan people. For the most part, these are Syrian people and Iraqi people. And if they're, lawbreakers, those governments have the obligation to keep their people safe and to take care of it. Here's the thing, and this is what I've been saying, and this situation here validates it. For these people to conduct a terrorist activity against the United States, they can't come here and take action against us. like the Bin Laden people are alleged to have done on September 11, 2001, where they physically came to the United States and did all this stuff. This is not what these people did. The only thing they can do is to try to get a lucky shot like this to find someone who's radicalized and then give them funding, support, whatever. All that remains to be seen. We don't know how much of that may or may not have happened, but that's the one path they can have. But why are they going to do that? The claim that some make is that they have this ideological thing to come after the United States is not supported by evidence or fact. They have domestic objectives in Syria, in Jordan, in Iraq, wherever they are. That's issues that are there local. If we're not on the ground there, they can do nothing to us. And of course, many of our troops there have been wounded. Scores of them have been wounded. 3 of them have been killed because we're there. So our troops are already been killed and wounded because we wouldn't withdraw them. So that's already a big problem for us and an unnecessary risk to our troops. Now then they're going to, I bet, many people are going to say, well, we need to redouble that because of this. Look, and unless you go in there with like a carpet bomb and kill every man, woman, and child in Syria that might be associated with Iraq, ISIS, you can't get rid of an ideology. It's not possible. And if you try, then you're going to, same thing as what Israel is going to discover in the future, that you have created far more enemy than you ever took off the battlefield. I saw it with my own hand. There's scores of reports out there all throughout the last 20 years of how, if you go in there heavy-handed and try to kill everybody, all you do is create more enemies. It's a well-known fact. It's all over the place. That's the situation here. If we had just withdrawn our troops and not been constantly going after and killing ISIS people, then what do you suppose they're going to do about it? This kind of thing is entirely possible. That they're saying, okay, because you're killing all our people, we'll do whatever we can to kill you back in response. And they are so weak and have so little power. This is the only thing that they can do. It makes no sense for us to continue to antagonize them, to kill individuals here when it cannot accomplish an objective for the U.S. It cannot be militarily accomplished. You just can't kill your way out of an idea. And to continue to target them and to continue to publicly talk about how we're on an anti-ISIS mission, what do you think they're going to do? Anyone who's being killed is going to try to strike back against the person doing the killing. And so now then here, it appears anyway at surface value that there has been a response and just a really kind of a lucky situation. I mean, the fact that there hadn't been any in the United States since 2014, when ISIS first came up. I mean, that tells you that our counter intelligence services have been very, very effective, but nothing's foolproof. I'm sure that's another thing that everybody's going to be wanting to look at is how did this fall beneath the radar? How did the FBI not see this? How did the local law enforcement miss it, et cetera? Because, they're looking on all these boards all the time for any kind of information here. And one of the questions I've got, I'll be really interested to see is, was this guy already on the radar? Was he already on a watch list, et cetera? That's something that I think is a key question that needs to be answered pretty quickly. But in any case, it did get through. So the question is going to be, what do you do about it now? And what we need to be very careful of is that we don't overreact and go in a way that can actually harm our interests. And listen, we've already lost 3 troops killed in this so-called counter-ISIS mission, and scores more have been wounded in various rocket attacks, and they're constantly under threat of that on a daily basis. Let's don't double down on that and put more. We already know, and I showed you about 2 weeks ago, that the Biden administration, unbeknownst to any American, doubled the number from 900 to, I guess 2,100, something like that. It was over 2,000, more than had been told was there before. No one said what the need was. No one has since that time explained, why did you need to double up that troop number? What are they doing there? Oddly enough, no one seems very interested in it. Well, maybe they should be interested now to find out what these folks are doing to provide national security for the United States of America. We need to find out what happened with this situation, folks. That the FBI, the local law enforcement officials, federal other officials, CIA, whatever it takes, we need to get to the bottom of this really rapidly and make certain that there is no additional threat to the United States and take action on anything that may be. But beyond that, we need to take a cold, hard, sober look at our policies to make sure that we're not unwittingly increasing the terrorist threat to our country. The primary objective should be to protect the homeland, to safeguard the lives of our men and women in uniform that are defending our country, and not bring unnecessary focus on our country that could provide impetus for those who wish to harm us even more desire and motivation to do so. Let's keep it down where it's necessary, and when it's required, when we find an actionable action against someone who wants to kill Americans, without question, we should take action. 100% in agreement with that. The bottom line is we need to do what will protect our country the most without increasing the risk unnecessarily. That's your deep dive today, folks. As I told you, this is a dynamic situation. It's happening all over the place right now, and people are trying to figure out what's going on. Oftentimes the first report is often wrong, and so anything that we have reported here that is later exposed to be different or inaccurate or insufficient, we'll bring that to you. But we'll definitely keep you up to date on all this so that you know what's happening right here. Thank you very much for watching. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.